Sorry, hey, give flu, ma'am. Sorry.
Or if the bailout is approved and released, Chairperson, do they do an investigation from their side? There must be some level of accountability from these SOEs as to what exactly happened in terms of what we are seeing in public. I'll come for the second Vice Chairperson. I just need
they fail when they fail to meet those conditions, that form of a sanction, do you exert on them as a form of punishment?
Recording in progress.
They do as they please. It's gonna be something they rotate to do the mistake. But if you are there as Treasury to make sure that you change these powers, maybe they can feel, maybe we can have our own entities, because as the government need those entities. But the way they are operating, really, we don't consider them as a state-owned companies. We can say something else. So those are the questions from us. I don't know, let me check whether, before I give you, Honorable Nana, you said you want to come back, or let them answer, then you'll do the follow-up. Is that a chocolate? Are you gonna do the follow-up after they answer?
Chair, it's on. Thanks a lot for the opportunity. It's on slide number 13, where National Treasury was talking about restructuring initiatives and disposable of non-core assets. I would want to check the extent of National Treasury in disposing of these non-core assets. I am asking this question, Chairperson, because in many instances, when SOEs are disposing non-core assets or similar transactions are being engaged by SOEs, the elite that is linked to the ANC are the only people, or in most instances, they are the most people that benefit from these kind of transactions. Now, I want to check how much focus does National Treasury give to these kind of transactions, and what is it that they are doing to ensure that you don't need to hold a green membership card, or you don't need to be born of a family of the ANC, of an ANC stalwart, before you can actually be allowed to be part of these transactions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Honorable Nana. Honorable Mkamse, you said you want to have another bite.
After the responses, Chair.
Oh, thank you very much. You can respond, DG, or whoever who's delegated to respond.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Chair. It's Ravesh Rajla. I'll basically just take you through some of the responses. I think, firstly, thank you for the questions and the opportunity to respond. And I think the first set of questions was asked by Honorable Bibi. In terms of shareholder compacts, in terms of drafting of shareholder compacts, we as a National Treasury don't get directly involved in drafting shareholder compacts in terms of the PFMA and in terms of legislation. We generally draft the shareholder compacts of our own entities that fall under the National Treasury, which is the PIC, Land Bank, DBSA, and SASRIA, unless there is a specific condition where we would get requested to draft the shareholder compact. Then will it only be the case? But as far as we are aware, we haven't done that in terms of drafting the shareholder compacts. But I think just to answer that question directly, we don't get involved in the executive in the executive authority's responsibilities of actually assisting in drafting the shareholder compacts. I think the other question asked by Honorable Bibi was in terms of the dividends that's been declared and paid out. We don't have all the information available at the moment, but we can respond in writing. But what we can say is that the PIC, SASRIA, and I think to a certain extent, AXA has declared dividends. I think with SASRIA, I think since 1998, they have declared and paid over 15 billion rands over to the National Revenue Fund. Then move on to the Honorable Ngwenia's questions around the NCOP. I think that's an oversight from us, so we will definitely include that because we are well aware that the NCOP, the National Council of Provinces, does play a key part in terms of oversight, and we apologize for that oversight. Then, in terms of the second question from the Honorable Ngwenya, in terms of the Presidential State-Owned Enterprises Council, at the moment there are no formal recommendations that are forthcoming from the committee. We, as the Treasury and in other departments, have been invited to present and give views on certain of the work streams. But in terms of the recommendations, I think that still has to go through the process of cabinet and so forth. And hence, in one of the slides, I think it was slide 18, we said that the work from PSEC is a bit slow, but we obviously a lot is dependent on the recommendations in terms of the SOE Act and the shoulder management model. In terms of moving on to the questions from the Honorable Nana, I think that's a very interesting question in terms of do we regard ourselves as a spoiling parent? In my view, I think not. I think we just have to bear in mind the fact that the process of bailouts and funding is basically an outcome of a cabinet process, and obviously it's cabinet recommendations in terms of funding. Obviously, you have MTEC, the Medium Term Expenditure Committee. Then you have the MTF or MINCOM-BUD process, where recommendations goes from MTEC to the Ministers' Committee on the Budget, and then from there it goes to cabinet. So obviously, we as the Treasury and the technical team does make certain recommendations to approve or not approve funding, but ultimately, when the Minister of Finance announces, funding in the budget, it's basically an outcome of a cabinet process and not necessarily a National Treasury process. However, we do input into the process. I think moving on to the next question from Honorable Nana was just in terms of how often do the entities and not meet Treasury conditions. I wouldn't want to name and shame them, but I think in the presentation that we had from the colleagues, I think one of the key matters that we are always concerned about is just around implementing a turnaround plan that leads to financial sustainability and viability. And we can literally name, all of those entities that had come for bailouts or have been bailout, where they've basically, were bailed out as a result of a financial plan or a turnaround plan, business plan that's not financially sustainable and viable. Hence the bailouts, and hence the government guarantees that were provided to ensure that they meet their liquidity, to ensure that they are a going concern, and hence that resulted in the bailout. So I think if we name and shame, it's been basically literally all of them that have had to come for certain bailouts through the course of the 10 years. I think in terms of the Honorable Nana's next question on Kuberg, in terms of the funding and Treasury's view on that, in terms of how they would get this funding, the view from the Minister of Finance and from the Treasury is that with the debt relief package announced of 254 billion, that will help to assist and ease the pressure of Eskom in terms of meeting certain debt and interest obligations. So that frees up cash, internally generated cash, that will be sufficient to maintain existing operations, including extending the life of Kuberg. So there's no further financial support that will be forthcoming from the Treasury. They would have to live within that means, within the 254 billion, and hence no further support has been requested and will be forthcoming from the National Treasury in terms of Eskom. I think Honorable Nana's question in terms of Workstream 6, in terms of dealing with corruption, in terms of NECOM, from my understanding, there has been good cooperation from the Treasury. I'm not directly involved with that Workstream 6, but I'm sure we can get colleagues to just report on the issues of corruption in terms of exactly what is happening there. But from my understanding and from the meetings that we are having with NECOM, and in fact, there is a meeting of NAT joints on Friday, where some of these issues will be discussed. There hasn't been any major concerns from a Treasury perspective in terms of that issue of corruption. And then moving on to the next set of questions from the Honorable Mabato, I think, if I'm not mistaken. In terms of the bailouts that have been provided, or the recapitalization, or the government guarantees, there are conditions which we monitor to ensure that those funds are not used for any other purposes than for example, I'm using an example here where, for example, there is guaranteed debt that needs to be settled, that those funds will be earmarked for guaranteed debt, and it will be then then it'll be earmarked, or it'll be, like, for example, the Eskom debt relief bill, which the funds have been specifically earmarked for settling of interest and debt payments that will ensure that those funds are not misused for any other purposes, and also to from an auditing perspective, that's also audited by the external auditors and internal auditors to ensure, and also from a treasury perspective through the monitoring committees, we then ensure that those funds are not misused and earmarked or are used for the specific or intent that they should be used from their side. In terms of the next question from the Honorable Mbato, in terms of how do we detect mismanagement of funds and corruption, this largely falls within the realm of the accounting authority of the entity, which is the board. They are responsible for ensuring that if there's any fraud or corruption, then it's reported. It's managed from a board perspective, reported then to the executive authority and to the National Treasury. I think from a National Treasury perspective, we've been dealing with one of the entities in terms of what powers do we have, and in terms of section, I think 6E of the PFMA, we then may investigate any system, for example, of financial mismanagement that we would then require to do. I think in terms of the hierarchy, in terms of how foreign corruption is detected, it basically, firstly emanates, is managed from the board, which is the accounting authority, then the executive authority. And obviously, as we reported in the presentation, from a treasury perspective, we get involved from the financial oversight, and then that's reported to us, and then we can also do our own independent investigation where required. And also we can include that as a condition as well, where we'd want to ensure that there's an independent investigation of such of the mismanagement of funds. And then moving on to the next question from the Honorable Mbato, in terms of political pressures from other ministries to release bailouts to SOCs, we have no such pressure from other ministries or ministers. I think all the conditions are basically issued, in certain cases by the Minister of, in terms of the appropriations, it is issued by the Minister of Finance, or it can be delegated, but there is no pressure, according to my knowledge, that we have had to release any of these bailouts to SOCs. And then in terms of accountability as well, what we're seeing now is with the new approach and the evolution of the funding requests or support for bailouts or recapitalizations, we basically with the new set of or the new framework that we have implemented with the pre and post conditions, we then can ensure that there is that accountability from a treasury perspective, and also to ensure that the funds are released as and when conditions are met. So I'm going to refer again to the ESCOM debt relief bill, where historically funds used to be released as a recapitalization. As Thabang mentioned, it will now be released as a loan. And it's only upon meeting those conditions that we have outlined in the budget review and HW3, and we meet them on a quarterly basis. And if they have met those conditions, then those specific loans will then be converted to equity. So it'll be a loan, it'll be come through as a loan, and upon meeting those conditions, then they will be basically converted into equity. And then for Denel, we didn't get the opportunity to look at that system or method in terms of conditions, but what we have done is the pre-disbursements and post-disbursements, where although we've released, I think, around about half of the money to Denel, the 1.8 to 1.9 billion, the remaining funds obviously can only be used upon them meeting certain conditions. So we are in fact, having a meeting this week with Denel to see progress thereon in terms of meeting those conditions where they can use then the remaining funds. I think, Chair, to your to your, to your question, Chair, in terms of what happens to the SOCs when they fail to meet conditions, what pressure do we exert on them? I think, as per the response or the part of the presentation from Mkulu around guarantees, where the entities have not met guarantee conditions, then they cannot apply for government guarantees. So that won't basically go through our fiscal liability committee. I think from a recapitalization and bailout perspective, that will also be a similar approach where we need to ensure that historic conditions are met, and before they are, we consider any forms of recapitalization, then those conditions have to be met, and hence we have that kind of control mechanism to ensure that we manage the bailouts for these SOCs. Then, Honourable Chair, I think your question in terms of how are we considering changing the borrowing powers? I'm going to use the ESCOM example again. We've basically instructed ESCOM through the provisional conditions or proposed conditions that there will be no borrowings going forward, because we cannot have a situation where we are providing the 254 billion to basically ease the debt burden, and then we give them borrowing powers and a guarantee, and then they rack up a debt and we're back to square one in maybe 2 or 3 years' time. So we need to also ensure that we implement these sort of restrictions in terms of borrowing powers. But as I mentioned in the presentation, we have the foreign borrowing limits where we implement certain restrictions around foreign borrowings, and also the the normal borrowings where we can actually implement conditions in terms of the Schedule 3Bs, like your water boards. We do implement certain restrictions around, and also certain covenants in terms of what gearing ratio or what ratios that they should attain, so that we don't have a situation where they also rack up all this debt. Then I think the question from the Honourable Nana, just in terms of the extent of National Treasury in disposing non-core assets, we as a National Treasury don't get involved directly in instructing or directing entities to dispose of non-core assets. That is a responsibility of the again, accounting authority, the board, and obviously that disposal then comes to us as a Section 54 PFMA application, which we then review. So we don't have any interference from a political perspective, and we don't direct entities to dispose of certain assets or non-core assets. That basically is up to the entity to ensure that they would then review their own internally, their business model, their financial plans, to look at how can they then ease or lessen the burden on the fiscus in terms of bailouts. And they need to look at some of the self-help initiatives that we've talked about, so including disposal of non-core assets, but we're not prescriptive in terms of which assets they should sell. And obviously in terms of the approval of which assets get disposed of, as I mentioned, that will basically be the responsibility of the accounting authority, the board basically, and then that comes through the executive authority, and then for us as a Treasury for noting. I think, Honourable Chair, I think that was the questions. If I've missed one out, please do let me know. I think the one question I did miss now, I remember, is from the Honourable Mbato. I think there was an expectation of more. I think we will take that back, and we will look at how we can improve on the future presentations in terms of the expectation. Chair, I hand over to you and the honourable members. Thank you.
Let me, before I can say anything, let me recognize that Honourable Chair, I can see you are back. I don't know, do you still have a problem of network, Chair? Honourable Chair Mkiva? Okay. Members, do you have any follow-up questions? I'll start with Honourable Mam Kausa, you said after the response, or they responded very well as you expected. Hello, can you hear me?
Chair, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Do you want any follow-up, Honorable Nana, Honorable Bibi, Honorable Mangwenya, and Honorable Mkause? Do we?
Yeah,
Any
Chairperson.
Yes, Honorable Nana.
On my part, really, it's. Oh, sorry, from my part, really, it's the parting shot from the gentleman who was responding to our questions. I can only see your first name, sir, and pardon me for not, mentioning your name in full. But, maybe let me preface what I'm going to say, Chair, by mentioning that for the longest time, I have appreciated, appreciated the resilience and professionalism at the National Treasury. National Treasury, if it was affected at the bare minimum by state capture, for instance. Men and women at National Treasury are an example of professionals, are an example of what a public servant should be. Not get into politics, do your work, do your work to your best of your ability. And for that reason, I've always thought that outside of government, we've got other ways of rebutting and fighting corruption, but in government, I'd always thought that National Treasury was our last line of defense. The last question I raised, National Treasury, has a direct reference to transactions such as that of ESCOM and an equity partner. And for some reason, I thought that to prevent mischievous elements from hijacking transactions such as those, at least National Treasury would have on such matters. But I do get your point, National Treasury. You leave it up to the executive authority to handle those kind of transactions. It's probably a matter, Chairperson, that we will have to take head on with DPE without really involving a National Treasury. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nana. Mema Mkausa?
Chairperson, thank you very much for the response from National Treasury. Chair, I'm really hoping that we are going to have more of these engagements with National Treasury. From the side of the committee, I'm going to propose that this type of engagements continues so that we are all on par as to what is really happening in these state-owned entities. It is honestly not a good some sort of a picture for us to get from whistleblowers, from the media, without having gotten information as to what really transpired. members of parliament are entitled to know as to what is happening to the public funds, the funds that are allocated to state-owned entities and the oversight thereof. So I'm going to further propose that this does not end here. We will have more of these engagements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mukause. Lastly, again, let me check. Chair, Honorable Mkiva, I know you wanted to have a bite. Hey, Honorable Nana, this network, really, we need to come back, really. I support you. You need to come back to the house. Let me take this opportunity because members are satisfied with your question, and from time to time, we will again request you to, if we have need any information from you, Treasury, we will call you, and we thank you for taking this opportunity to come to brief us, because indeed, this thing of SOEs, it's a crisis. And we cannot say we are happy or we are not happy. When we see our entity every day, they are falling apart. So please continue to do your oversight, and you must report to us. If there are any challenges, we are there as the members of parliament that are doing oversight over the executive to assist and keep on trying. We know it's very difficult for you to monitor or to do oversight all the entities that are there in the country, but keep on trying. At the end of the day, you'll see what you are doing, it's best for the country. By so saying, let me thank you. You are now released so that we can continue with the business of our committee. Thank you very much, Treasury.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thanks to the Treasury team, and thank you to the honorable members as well. Thank you. Take care. Keep well.
Well, too. Members, now, while they are just leaving the platform, Amanda, can you start with putting the previous minutes on the screen so that we can go through them and check whether there are mistakes or check whether there are, you didn't include something in your minutes?
Okay, Chair, I'll do it just now.
Sure. Honorable members, let me put in front of you the minutes of the 3rd May 2023, where we were briefed by Department of Cooperative Government and Traditional Affairs assessment. Oh yes, of the upgraded instruction of Richardsveld community to the municipality standard, complete the deeds of settlement. Page 1 is the attendance attendance and the apologies. Let's go to page 2. That's the open and the chairperson, and then the opening remarks of the deputy minister. And then the briefing by the department, public enterprise. The next page, yes. Next slide. This our deliberations. This is the response. Yes. Let's continue. Okay. The last honorable members, here is the previous our last minutes. I hope you did receive on time and you go. Now I put it in front of you for approval. Any mover?
Thanks, Chair.
Honorable.
Ngwenya. I would like to move to adopt the minutes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Momo. Any seconder? Any
I
seconder?
second chairperson, 50 seconds, chairperson.
Thank you, Momo. Take care.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
The minutes of the 3rd May 2023 have been adopted. Anything else, Amanda?
No, Chair, we are done with the agenda.
Okay, this brings us to the end of our meeting. Honorable members, thank you very much for coming to the meeting. Though it was difficult when we start, all of us, we had a serious challenge of a network. Till now, the chairperson is in the meeting, but he can speak, but we cannot hear him because of this network. He is in the meeting. You can even see him. So thank you very much. Let's
Thanks, Chair.
try to
Thank you,
come
Chair.
Bye.
back. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mama Ngwenya.
Chocolate.
Hey, you
Hi,
were good.
Chocolate.
Hey,
You
you
must
were
bring
good
chocolate
today.
for me in the house.
You were good today. Well done. Well done. You were good today. Yo,
Yeah, no,
Thanks
really.
very much. Thank you very much, Choki.
Yeah, I liked it. Hey, I liked it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Yeah, you bless them, Mama. Thank you.
Chocolate with you know.
They undermine NCOP normally.
Recording stopped.